The House of Representatives has approved bills dealing with gun control and immigration, but they remain stalled in the Senate.
Joining us, U.S. Representative Adam Schiff of Burbank. He's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and is currently in Southern California for a number of pandemic-related events. Chairman Schiff, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you. In the wake of two mass shootings in Colorado and Georgia, two bills for stronger background checks for guns have passed the House. Once again, they are stuck in the U.S. Senate. Republicans, we've heard, like Ted Cruz, say Democrats are engaged in, quote, ridiculous theater. He says gun control doesn't lessen crime, it makes it worse. To that you say what?
Well, that's just absurd. If you look at one of the loopholes we're trying to close, the Charleston loophole, that's a loophole that says that if you don't get your background check done in 3 days, you can get the gun even if you're a felon, even if you're disqualified for any reason. Just in the last 10 months alone, 5,000 people through that loophole have gotten guns that should have been prohibited from getting a gun. And it might be somebody with a domestic violence conviction and a restraining order, or it might be someone with a history of gun violence. And so these provisions can save lives. They do save lives. The other provision would make background checks universal. It makes no sense, maybe it does to Ted Cruz, but not to the rest of us, why you can be prohibited from buying a gun at a store if you're a felon, but you can buy that same gun online with no background check. That just makes no sense at all.
What are your thoughts on yesterday's decision by a California-based federal appeals court that says states can restrict open carry gun laws without violating Second Amendment rights?
Well, I think that's right. You know, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It allows us to take certain common sense safety measures to protect our community. And I think these are very consistent with that. What's more, about 80% of the public is supporting these laws. And you have, you know, sadly, a fairly unified Republican bloc in the Senate that will kill any efforts to change the gun laws, even at the risk of their own constituents' lives. And I mean, how many more gun tragedies do we need to have? It just doesn't have to be this way in our country.
Let's move to immigration. The House has signed off on two immigration bills that would give undocumented workers and DACA recipients new paths to citizenship. We've heard about green cards before. What are blue cards, and what do these bills do?
Well, these bills would try to make sense of our immigration process, provide a comprehensive immigration plan so that we don't have this patchwork and we don't have millions of people living in the shadows. It would provide a path to citizenship. It would also provide legal status for those that are in the fields that are producing the food that keeps us fed during this pandemic. So I think these are very responsible. Again, I think they have a lot of public support. Immigration is one of the most difficult issues we face, as we can see at the border, where we have this now flood of unaccompanied children who have put their own lives at risk. And have created an urgent problem for us to try to overcome.
Let's talk about that surge at our southern border. 11,000 unaccompanied minors have arrived at our border. That's in just the last month alone. Overcrowded facilities, we know, complicating things further. We're dealing with a pandemic on top of it all. Vice President Harris has become the point person to deal with this crisis. What's your reaction to that? And also the pushback on President Biden's $4 billion spending plan for immigration over the next 4 years?
Well, I think that she's a very good choice, and it's going to be an enormously difficult assignment. But I think she understands what needs to be done. That, first of all, we need to discourage people from coming here, particularly as unaccompanied minors. Given the dangers of making that trip, we should let people know that we are setting up a process where they can apply for asylum or refugee status back in their home countries. We need to work with our allies to our south to stop this flow of people to the country, work collaboratively to also address the violent conditions in their home countries. And resources will be needed for all of that. When kids do make that trip, I don't think they should be in Customs and Border Patrol custody. They should be in the custody of Health and Human Services until they can be placed temporarily with loved ones. But this will require resources. And I think the administration is moving expeditiously to try to deal with an overwhelming challenge.
This morning, we know you're going to go to the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank. Last night, you hosted a telephone town hall with LA County health officials and FEMA. Talk to us about the response to the pandemic, the fact that we're finally starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. But one thing that we hear a lot is the vaccine situation. In some states, depending on your age, you can get a vaccine right now. In California, we keep saying we're not getting enough vaccine. How come?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, in terms of the community food banks, they really need our support right now because the demand is greater than ever. And volunteers are down because a lot of the volunteers pre-pandemic were seniors, and a lot of seniors haven't felt it was safe to come back out and volunteer. So these food banks need donations of food. They need volunteer help. But, seeing them operate, I have to say, is among the most uplifting things because you really see the community coming together to meet the need. In terms of vaccinations, I was out at two sites, one at Cal State LA, where they're doing 8,000 vaccinations a day, one at Kaiser, where they're doing 2,000 vaccinations a day. And the production of vaccines is ramping up. And I think that's going to continue as new vaccines come online. And that's really good news. It gives us some light at the end of the tunnel. There are other states that don't have the tiers, as you say, but part of the reason they don't have the tiers is there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy in some of those states. And so they're not having the same demand, and they have the supply that they need because the demand isn't quite so great.
I see.
The demand in California has been very high, and so we still don't have all the vaccines that we need.
Representative Schiff, thank you for your time this morning, being with us. Again, Representative Adam Schiff of Burbank, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and currently serving his 11th term.